Welcome to Biography Central. You are listening to Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a complete biography. Chapter 1, Ancestry. In the middle of the 18th century, there lived in the village of Daripur, district of Hooghly, Bengal, a Brahmin family, of which Manikram Chattopadhyaya, familiarly known as Chatterjee, was the head. The Chatterjees were God-fearing people and observed all the Hindu religious rites with the utmost exactitude and devotion. They had lived there for several generations and were respected by the villagers for their honesty, piety, and straightforwardness. Sri Ramachandra was the tutelary deity of the family, as indicated by the use of Rama in naming most of its members. The Chatterjee family lived the typical Brahmin life of olden times, never deviating from the dictates of its conscience and always ready to lend a hand of support to the needy and distressed of the village in times of calamity. Manik Ram was fairly affluent, with nearly 50 acres of land at his disposal, the produce of which, together with some outside income, was sufficient to maintain his family and enabled him to help his poor neighbors. In course of time, probably in the year 1775, he was blessed with a son whom he called Kutharam. He was who later became the father of the remarkable being who is the subject of this chronicle. 2 other sons and a daughter were born to him, all of whom were reared according to the family traditions, the sons being educated in the village Pathshala. After the death of Manik Ram, the care of the family fell upon the shoulders of young Kutharam. His qualifications eminently fitted him for this task. Of a kindly nature, with a strong sense of justice, unwavering honesty, even to a point detrimental to his own interest, and intensely devotional, he proved himself equal to the trust reposed in him, not only by his father, but by the Divine Mother, who was soon to give one of her elect into his care. He was more than blessed in his life partner, Srimati Chandramani, or Chandra, as she was called by the family. In addition to her faith in her husband and all his judgments, no matter what reaction they might have on her own life, she had a character of great simplicity and sweetness, intense faith in and love for God and humanity. So universal was the latter that she was called the mother of her little community. No one was ever turned away disappointed from her door. The women of the village came to her in their trials and perplexities, knowing they would receive unselfish aid and advice. Such are the unusual characteristics of the 2 who were chosen to be the custodians and guides of the early years of one of the greatest sages whose presence ever blessed this earth. 9 years after the birth of his first son Ramkumar, Kutharam was visited in 1814 by a sudden stroke of misfortune. Ramananda Ray, the zemindar of the village, was a most tyrannical landlord, and the villagers were all afraid of him. One of them was guilty of some indiscretion, and Ramananda, to show his displeasure, entered suit on false charges and called upon Kutharam to give evidence in Ramananda's favor. Kutharam not only had a horror of courts and avoided them whenever possible, but he knew as well that this was a concocted case. If he acceded to the request, he would do violence to his conscience, perhaps for the first time in his life. If he declined, he would incur the anger of Ramananda. After a severe struggle with himself, he decided to refuse to lend his support. Ramananda was very angry at Kutharam's audacity and decided to teach him a lesson. So he brought false charges against him too, and Kutharam lost his ancestral property, including the huts which had so long sheltered him and his family. Overwhelming as was this misfortune, he did not lose faith in the Lord Ramachandra, but bowed his head before his inscrutable dispensation. There was nothing for him to do but to leave Daripur, and as his 2 brothers took refuge with their respective fathers-in-law, he felt free to accept the invitation of his friend Sukhal Goswami of Kamarpukur to make his new home there. And of the once prosperous and prominent Chatterjee family of Daripur there remained, after his departure, only the Shiva temple with its large tank and the affection and gratitude of the villagers. The village of Kamarpukur is situated in the northwestern promontory of the Hooghly district, adjacent to Bankara and Midnapur. The villages of Bengal 50 years ago presented quite a different aspect from that of today. instead of desolate villages with inhabitants worn out by disease and starvation. As may be seen since the invasion of malaria in 1867, healthy men and women passed their days in joyous affluence. Kamarpukur was no exception to the rule. The village landlords, descendants of a line of spiritual preceptors to the Maharajas of Burdwan, lived in that village, contributing to a great extent to its prosperity. Besides, it was situated on the road to the holy place of Puri or Jagannath. The villagers were mostly agriculturists and craftsmen. The village was famous for certain sweets and ebony pipes used in making hookah devices, also known as hubble bubbles at that time. There was also a thriving handloom industry, the products of which were sold even in the markets of Calcutta. Various religious festivals throughout the year added to the serene and innocent merriment of the village folk. Sri Dharma, the presiding deity of the village, was worshipped, especially during the Rath Yatra, car festival, with great fervor. 3 or 4 large tanks, Audiobook being the most noted, supplied the village with pure water. The flourishing condition of Kamarpukur is still evidenced by the debris of its old buildings and the ruins of great walls and temples. There still survives a large mango grove dedicated to public use by Manik Chandra Banerjee. Manik was the zemindar, landlord, of a neighboring village, and because of his extensive charities, was lovingly called Manik Raja by the villagers. At this time, Suklal Goswami, a kind-hearted and pious man, was the zemindar of Kamarpukur. The ruins of his brick-built residence and his tomb are still to be seen. He died about the year 1824. His son, owing to adverse circumstances, had to sell the ancestral zamindari to the Laha family of the village, to whom it still belongs. It was at the invitation of this Suklal that Khudiram moved to Kamarpukur. Suklal gave him a portion of his own house, consisting of a few huts, and settled on him nearly half an acre of very fertile land, known as the Lakshmi Jala, or Fortune's Meadow, for maintenance. Khudiram entered his new house with his wife, his 10-year-old son, and a 4-year-old daughter in his 39th year. The unjust eviction from his ancestral home and the subsequent welcome and shelter received at Kamarpukur left a profound and indelible impression on his mind. He was utterly disgusted with the world, its hypocrisy, malice, and greed. His love and devotion to God increased 1,000-fold, and he learned to lean upon him more and more. The unexpected way in which he found shelter at a time when he was void of hope and nothing but ruin stared him in the face, filled his heart with calm resignation to the divine will and a total indifference to all mundane things. He began to devote much of his time to prayer, meditation, and the worship of Sri Ramachandra. Sometimes whole days were passed in this way, for the fertile land of Lakshmi Jala did not make much demand on his time or energy. When the field was ready, Khudiram would transplant a few seedlings with the words, "Glory unto Raghavir," leaving the rest to the laborers. The crops never failed him. There was always enough, even in times of drought or flood, to supply not only the simple needs of the family, but to help beggars and strangers as well. At this time, Khudiram came strangely into possession of the emblem of his tutelary deity, Raghavir. One day, while returning home from a neighboring village where he had gone on business, he felt tired and sat down under a tree by the side of a paddy field, fell asleep, and dreamed a wonderful dream. His beloved Ishta, favorite deity, Sri Ramachandra, in complexion like a young blade of grass, appeared as a boy and said, unnoticed and uncared for, "I have been starving here for many days. Take me to your home. I am eager to accept your offerings." Beside himself with joy, Khudiram replied, "My lord, I am devoid of devotion and too poor to think of installing thee in my hut. If I fail to show thee proper respect, I shall suffer the agony of hell." The boy Ramachandra reassured him and said, "Do not be afraid. I shall be satisfied with your service in spite of its defects." Khudiram wept at this unsolicited mercy of the Lord and awoke from his sleep. As he looked about, he saw the place pointed out in his dream. With trembling limbs, he slowly moved to the spot and, to his amazement and joy, found a salagrama or round stone emblem of Vishnu, sheltered under the hood of a venomous snake. He stretched forth his hands to take it, and the snake slithered away. Calling aloud the name of Raghavir, he clasped it to his chest. Examination showed the emblem to be of the type called Raghavir. He took it home and regarded it as his own Ishta. Khudiram soon attracted the notice and gained the respect of his neighbors at Kamarpukur for his intense devotion and unsullied purity. They sought his blessings, believing in their potency, and none would touch the water of the Halderpukur when he was bathing there. At this time, he made an appreciable advance in spirituality. Keeping his mind on a plane of consciousness far above the world of sense pleasures, he began to have visions. Sometimes, while gathering flowers for his daily worship, he saw the goddess Sitala going before him in the form of an 8-year-old girl with a radiant smile and bedecked with various precious ornaments, as she helped him pluck the flowers by bending the branches. At other times, as he sat for meditation, tears of love trickled down his cheeks, and his mind soared far away into higher regions, where he found himself in close communion with his beloved deity. Then, and when he uttered the Gayatri mantra, his face and chest became radiant. The impression created by Chandradevi in the village was equally great. Her kindness soon attracted attention. Beggars found that as long as there was a morsel of food in the house, she would share it. She was indulgent to the demands and importunities of boys and girls, and the village women came to her for help to solve their difficulties. Thus, though the huts of Khudiram never smiled in affluence, they were a source of solace to many. Sri Ramakrishna, later in life, referring to his parents, said to his disciples and devotees, "My mother was the very embodiment of rectitude and sincerity. She did not know much about the ways of the world, and being innocent of the art of concealment, would say what was in her mind. People loved her greatly for her open-heartedness. My father never accepted gifts from the Sudras. He spent much of his time in worship, meditation, and the telling of beads. Every day, while engaged in prayer, as he invoked the goddess Gayatri, his chest swelled and became radiant with a divine glow, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Again, in hours of leisure, when he was not engaged in worship, he would make garlands for Raghavir. He left his ancestral home to avoid giving false evidence. The villagers respected him as a sage. After 6 years of residence in Kamarpukur, Khudiram married off his son and daughter. Ramkumar, Khudiram's first son, attained proficiency in the Hindu code in the toll of an adjacent village. Toll is an old school where Sanskrit learning and all its branches are taught. Soon, Ramkumar was able to relieve, to a certain extent, his father's family burden. The Chatterjees had become comparatively prosperous. Ramkumar added to the income by giving opinions on disputed points of religious ceremonials or by assisting in the performance of specific rites. The story that Ramkumar had acquired supernatural powers still lives in the village. People looked upon his prophecies as infallible and related, that after his initiation to the worship of the Shakti, the goddess bestowed on him miraculous powers in astrology, and that thenceforward he could tell whether a patient would live or die. Shivaram Chatterjee, Ramkumar's nephew, used to tell a story of his uncle's prophetic power. Ramkumar was in Calcutta on business and went to the Ganges to bathe. A rich man with his family was there also for the same purpose. In pursuance of the custom obtaining in some rich families for the strict maintenance of the Purta system, the wife was taken to the water of the Ganges in a palanquin. From that she was taking her bath. Ramkumar was standing nearby and accidentally caught a glimpse of her beautiful face. With a deep sigh, he remarked that the body which was being so scrupulously kept from public gaze would be consigned in the presence of all, the next morning, to this very Ganges as a lifeless corpse. The husband was greatly astonished, for his wife was young and strong. He invited Ramkumar to his home, with a view to punishing him should the prophecy prove to be false. But to the surprise and grief of all, the woman died. On another occasion, in the case of his own wife, Ramkumar's vision was prophetic. This young woman, who was endowed with many auspicious marks, seemed to bring with her an advent prosperity into the Chatterjee family and was beloved by everyone. But one day, Ramkumar gravely told his relatives that though everything appeared propitious, yet she would die at the birth of her first child. When she remained childless, Ramkumar was relieved, but in the year 1849, at the age of 35, she gave birth to a beautiful boy and passed away. With Ramkumar looking after the family, Khudiram had more time at his disposal and spent almost the whole day in meditation, worship, and religious discourses. He found that the only harbor of refuge in a distracted world was in continuous devotion to God. There arose in him the desire to go on pilgrimage, for did not the scriptures teach that God revealed himself most in holy places frequented by devotees and sanctified from time immemorial by the presence of sages and anchorites? It was probably in the year 1824 that Khudiram started on his long pilgrimage to Rameshwar in South India, a place highly venerated by the Hindus. It is associated with the sacred memory of Sri Ramachandra, who, on his return from Lanka, worshipped the god Shiva there. Khudiram traveled the whole distance of nearly 1,500 miles on foot, visiting various holy places on the way. This pilgrimage lasted about a year. 12 months later, in 1826, his wife Chandra became the mother of a second son, who was named Rameshwar. About 11 years later, Khudiram felt a strong inclination to go on another pilgrimage, this time to Gaya. Though advanced in years, he wished, according to the time-honored custom of the Hindus, to redeem the souls of his departed ancestors by the reverential offering of pinda, the oblation of barley made into balls, at the holy footprint of Lord Vishnu there. In spite of his years, the journey of nearly 200 miles on foot had no terrors for him. Khudiram started for Gaya early in the year 1835 and arrived there in the month of March. I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.